Welcome back to the Clash of Cultures channel. As we continue on with our college football preview series, today we're going to be previewing Texas. Before we get into the football talk, as always, if you're new to the channel, please do us a huge favor and leave a like down below, as well as hitting that subscribe button along with the notification bell so you do not miss a single upload or your favorite team being discussed here on the channel. Also, if you're a returning viewer, we appreciate the love and support as we continue to grow this community. So as we get into talking about the Texas Longhorns, obviously getting Arch Manning and, obviously a huge name in the football scene. What is your take and your outlook on how you think the Texas team is going to be doing this year?
I'll be honest. If Arch plays, Texas is probably having a poor year. I think at the end of the day, it's all about Quinn Ewers. If you remember, number one, so Arch obviously number one recruit last year in last year's recruiting class. 2 years ago is Quinn Ewers, a just prototype quarterback with a rocket arm. Now, I think some of that. Now he has to come into his own, right? He doesn't have Robinson back there, Bijan Robinson back there to hand the ball off to. Not saying they don't have anybody in the backfield, but they also lost Roschon Johnson. So Texas lost both his starting and backup running back last year. They are bringing back Jonathan Brooks, but I think this year is going to be about them airing the ball out. They bring back Xavier Worthy, and like I said, they bring back Quinn. Quinn is going to have to fling the ball around the football field for them to win games. They did get Adanya Mitchell from Georgia. Didn't get much playing time there, so we'll really see what he's about. They're bringing back Jordan Withington, who also was a 600-yard receiver last year. So like I said, between Xavier Worthy, Withington, and Mitchell, Quinn is going to have to win this game with his arm. Like I said, he didn't necessarily have to do that last year. He only threw for barely over 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns. But I think if this team is going to be good, it's going to be on the back of Quinn Ewers. He's going to have a 3,000-yard season, a 3,000-plus yard season, 20, 30 touchdowns passing. Worthy's going to have to go over 1,000 yards and be really one of the top receivers in college football because, like I said, I think Texas is going to have a little departure from last year's model, which was pound the ball with Robinson, who, again, they lost 1,500 yards rushing. And then when you throw in Roschon Johnson, that's over 2,000 yards rushing that they lost. That was the bread and butter of that team last year. This year is going to be spread it out and spread the ball around with the passing game.
Yeah, so my kind of take on Texas, when you think about college football, Texas is one of the first names that come to mind. Okay. I think if you're a college football fan, obviously, last episode we talked a little bit about USC being not in the championship game in 20 seasons almost, and then playing them in 2005, playing Texas. I think there's just certain teams you want to see good in college football, and I feel like Texas is one of those teams you want them to be relevant, as well as like the Florida Gators of the world. Just schools that when you kind of at least in my age group, you grew up watching, and they were kind of relevant. You want to see them be relevant again. And I think with the direction college football is going to right now with NIL, Texas is going to be, I guess, quote unquote, back, if you want to say, pretty soon with signing Arch Manning, being able to get the top recruits signed with them based off of money, stuff like that. So I would hope, I'll give my prediction later in the video. I would hope that this season, Texas went 8-5 last year. I would hope that they, are a 10 or 11 win team this year. I don't have them in the playoffs, so I'm sorry to you Texas fans who may have them in the playoffs. Now I think, like we said in the Alabama video a few videos ago, the second game against Alabama is going to show a lot. I think if they're able to compete like they were last year, like I said in the Alabama video, I think they should have won that game. Given their starting quarterback wouldn't have went down. But I think the first step is to compete against Alabama, respectively, whether you win or lose, compete against them, show them that you're a worthy team, and then try to get into the Big 12 title game. I'm not saying win the Big 12 title, but in the Big 12, you don't have to. There's no divisions. It's the two best teams. So this year it was so close to get in, as far as it's kind of like the Pac-12. There were so many teams that had a chance to get in. So I think Texas, if they can get to that stage and show that, hey, we can compete for a conference title year in and year out, then that's going to be the first step. Obviously, they just signed Arch Manning. That brought a lot of media attention and coverage to Texas. So there's going to be a lot more expectations for Texas. At this point, you have Peyton Manning's nephew or whatever he is. He's
his nephew.
Yeah, okay. So he's going to be arguably, assuming that he pans out what we want him to be, he's going to be a top quarterback in college football with Heisman-type potential and expectation for a prestigious school and or program. So I would hope that they get to that level. Like I said, they did go 8-5 last year, and people might scoff at the record of 8-5, saying that's not a good record. But at the end of the day, every one of their losses came by 7 points or less. They were in every single one of those games.
Yep.
Given that they lost to the eventual national championship runner-ups in TCU by a touchdown, and they lost to Alabama, which is a top program in the country, by 1 point after losing their starting quarterback for that game. So just the mere fact that those two games, they were in the ball game, shows that the team has coaching potential as well as skill and talent potential on the roster. So I think from the outside looking in, they just have to put it all together. I get they lost Bijan Robinson, and they lost another player. I forget off the top of my head. They lost another player on offense.
Well, they lost Roschon Johnson.
Okay, and so they lost Bijan, they lost Roschon Johnson, but I think one thing that needs to be talked about, they brought back their entire starting line. Their entire offensive line is coming back. Their tight end is coming back. So
Jatavion Sanders.
Obviously, the quarterback is still there in Quinn Ewers. So I truly think this team is going to be a lot better than when people are giving them credit for. I anticipate them competing for the Big 12 title. I probably wouldn't favor them to win it, but I think they have a good shot at least getting there and being in that chance to kind of shine on the grandest stage of their conference.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of flip it. And this is also something you said for Jalen Milroe with Alabama. I think it's going to be, you got to let Quinn cook and let him make his mistakes and let him figure out. I think the guy has immense talent. Obviously, he was at Ohio State for a season. But like I said, he was the number one quarterback in the nation for a reason. He has a big arm. He can make all the throws. And I think last year they kind of kept training wheels on him during the season. I think this year you got to let him cook. And I think he's going to show, like I'm not going to say his second season starting. I'm not going to say he's not going to make some mistakes. But I think you're going to see exactly why he was the number one recruit coming out in his season. Like you mentioned, they are bringing back some talent on offense. They are losing Bijan, but Worthy, but Whittington, but Sanders. They are bringing back, and like you said, that offensive line. And I think they're bringing back some players on defense. So I suspect this is going to be a very good team.
Yeah, I mean, and I think with their schedule, it's kind of been like a common theme other than a few teams. Like we talked about USC, I think they have a tougher schedule. But I think with Texas's schedule, we're gonna find out a lot. We're gonna learn a lot about them on September 9th when they play Alabama. They have to travel to Alabama. Like I said, I wouldn't favor them in that game, but I think if they compete, even if they were to lose by, again, like a touchdown or 10 points, I think that's going to show a lot because Alabama is better than everybody in their conference. And I think that's – go ahead.
Yeah, and as you guys know, if you've seen the Alabama video, I picked Texas to win this game.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think Alabama is by far their toughest game on their schedule, and it's not a conference game. So even if you happen to drop that game, you still have a chance to prove yourself in conference play, and you still have a chance to make it ultimately to the playoff. Like I said, I don't think they'll make it to the playoff. My hope for Texas would be obviously to improve on the 8-5 season, but even if you go 10-2, I still think that's a win for them, given that they haven't really been a top 10 to 12 team in a long time. So I think just being a team where you're talking about towards the end of the year when they're doing the college football playoff committee, just having a team where you're bumping up into the top 8 and 9 and 10, I think that would be good for Texas fans and the overall culture for that team. So, I mean, we'll just have to see. My prediction for them, I would say they're going to go probably 9-3 or 10-2. I think the only hard games are obviously going to be Alabama. I think Baylor's going to be a tough game. I think Oklahoma's going to be a tough game. And then you have Kansas State. I think TCU is going to be down this year. So, I mean, I don't think they're going to have any trouble with them, but I still think the other teams that I just mentioned they're going to have problems with, but I don't think they're going to lose every one of those games. Again, they were within 7 points of their 5 losses last year.
Yeah, I have them going 10-2, beating Alabama, but dropping 2 games in conference. And I'm going to be honest, I have them winning the Big 12. I think, again, you named a number of tough games they have, and I think it's going to take a little while for it to kind of come together, like I said, without Robinson to hand the ball off to. So, again, you kind of pick your 2 games, but Baylor, Kansas, who looked much better last year, Oklahoma, who I think in their second year under Venables is going to be much improved. BYU is always tough. Kansas State looked pretty tough last year. TCU looked, and again, we don't know what they are. Iowa State has had some seasons, and so has Texas Tech. Like I said, I think Texas is going to drop 2 of those. I think the Big 12 is going to be a bunch of teams that are kind of in that 7-5, 8-4, 9-3, 10-2 range. So I think that's how Texas gets in the Big 12 championship game. And I think by then they kind of have their offense figured out. They know what they're doing. Sarkisian is a good coach. He has them kind of where they need to be. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs at 10-2. I don't have a Big 12 team getting in. But I think they have a what we would consider a successful season in their upward trajectory.
Yeah. So, and just to kind of talk a little bit about the Bijan Robinson situation, how they lost him. Obviously, he ran for 1,600 yards and 18 touchdowns. But I think, given the fact they brought back their entire offensive line and their tight end, I think that's going to be a huge perk for Ewers, as well as Jonathan Brooks, who's going to be their lead running back. I think, obviously, Brooks is not going to be the talent of Bijan, but bringing back your entire offensive line from last year who blocked for Bijan and them getting a brand new or all new experience again with the offseason, even more experience with Jonathan Brooks, I think that's going to be even better for their offense. And I really don't think Ewers is going to have to do too much as far. Well, let me rephrase that. He'll have to shoulder the load, but it's going to make it a lot easier on a quarterback when you're bringing back your entire starting offensive line. And Texas, like I said, with the NIL deals, have been able to get some good quality offensive linemen, whether it be in the transfer portal or as well as recruiting. So I truly think it's going to come down to their front five, or I guess you'd say six with the tight end on offense, but as well as on defense, because on defense, their entire front seven is going to look completely different. I want to say they brought back either one or two guys, but their front seven is going to look completely different. So I think really it's going to come down to how good the defense can be and how far they can take them. The secondary brought back, I think, 3 of the 4 players, so they should be fine in the secondary. That looks pretty much the same, but the front seven on defense is what's going to be the kind of the question mark for Texas. So I guess we'll just have to see there.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan Watts, one of the boundary corners for Texas from Ohio. Well, he went to Ohio State. He's from Texas, but he went to Ohio State for a little while. Yeah, so to speak to Jonathan Brooks, I think the question is really, we didn't see him much last year. I think he had under 200 yards, didn't have a bunch of carries. Only had one game where he had more than 10 carries, though. And in that game, that was against Kansas, he went for 108 yards. So 11 carries, 108 yards in that game. So, you know, to your point, I'm not saying that Jonathan Brooks isn't that guy. He might be. We just haven't seen him. And like you said, running behind this offensive line, I think that only helps the cause.